Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're tackling something super relevant, especially if you're prepping for UPSC. We're talking Aadhaar and voter ID linkage.
A topic that's been making headlines, sparking debates, and you know it's got to be important if it's got everyone talking.
Right. And for all our future IAS officers out there, trust me, this is one you'll want to pay attention to.
Absolutely. It's practically guaranteed to pop up, whether it's an essay topic in mains or a tricky fact check in prelims.
So let's get right to it. Aadhaar and voter ID linkage. Where do we even begin with this one? I gotta admit, when I first started reading about this whole thing, I was kind of surprised.
Surprised? How so?
Just by how far back this idea actually goes.
Mm.
I had no clue it even predates the Puttaswamy judgment.
You're talking about NRPAP, right?
NRPAP, yeah.
Yeah.
The National Electoral Rolls Purification and Authentication Program. It kicked off back in 2015.
Okay, NRPAP. Yeah, that's ringing a bell now.
Its goal was to use Aadhaar to clean up the voter lists. I do remember something about that being halted by the Supreme Court, though, right?
You're absolutely right. Back then, the court was, let's say, a bit more hesitant about expanding Aadhaar's use.
It was mostly limited to welfare schemes, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. So how did we go from a Supreme Court halt to, well, millions of voters already linking their Aadhaar? It's quite a journey.
It is. Fill us in. What happened?
Well, the turning point was the 2017 Puttaswamy judgment. This judgment upheld the constitutional validity of Aadhaar.
And that kind of opened the floodgates, didn't it?
You could say that. It paved the way for broader applications of Aadhaar, including, you guessed it, electoral reforms.
Which brings us to the 2021 amendment.
Right. The 2021 Amendment to the Representation of the People Act. This specifically allowed for Aadhaar voter ID linkage.
But, and this is crucial, it's voluntary.
Huge point. Voluntary is the key word here.
Definitely something to highlight, especially for anyone prepping for prelims. You could easily get tripped up on that.
Couldn't agree more. And the Election Commission has been super clear about this. Linking is not mandatory.
So no one's going to be denied their right to vote just because they haven't linked their Aadhaar?
Absolutely not. Your vote is your right.
Okay, so let's break down the process a bit. For those already registered voters, you can link your Aadhaar using Form 6B, right?
That's right. And for new voters, you can provide your Aadhaar details directly during registration.
And that would be using Form 6.
Exactly. Now, here's a little tidbit that might be useful. Some of the older forms, well, they haven't been updated to reflect the voluntary aspect.
Oh, really? So there's still some confusion out there.
There is. It's kind of a reminder that even with the best intentions, implementing large-scale policy changes, it can get messy.
Bureaucracy strikes again.
You got it. So we've talked about the history, the legal framework, the process. Now let's get to the heart of the matter. Why bother?
Yeah, why go through all this trouble? What are the arguments in favor of linking Aadhaar and voter ID?
Ugh, the million-dollar question. Well, proponents argue that Aadhaar, being a unique identifier, can be a powerful tool to clean up our electoral rolls.
Makes sense. No more duplicate entries, no more fake IDs.
In theory, at
Right,
least.
right. But have we seen any of this in practice?
Well, over 650 million Aadhaar numbers have already been linked to voter IDs.
Whoa, 650 million, that's massive.
It is. It shows you the potential scale of this initiative.
But did all this linking actually lead to any tangible results?
That's a question researchers are still trying to fully understand. Early reports from states like Telangana, which has achieved almost 100% linkage, suggest a significant reduction in duplicate entries and bogus voters.
Sounds promising, but I guess the jury's still out on the long-term impact on electoral outcomes, right?
Right. We need more data, more research, more time to really see the full picture.
So cleaning up the voter rolls, that's one potential benefit. What else do proponents highlight?
Well, beyond tackling duplicate entries, they also argue that Aadhaar linkage can boost administrative efficiency for the Election Commission, a cleaner, more accurate voter database. It just makes everything smoother, less administrative overhead.
Saves time, saves resources.
You got it.
So that all sounds pretty good so far. But I imagine there's another side to this coin, right? I mean, there got to be some concerns about Aadhaar voter ID linkage.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where things get interesting, especially for our UPSC aspirants out there. You need to be able to see both sides of the argument.
Analyze those arguments.
Exactly. And, one of the biggest concerns that keeps coming up is data privacy.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one these days. Data privacy, it's always a hot topic. But when you're talking about something as sensitive as voting, well, it takes on a whole new level of importance.
Right. Linking Aadhaar with voter IDs, it raises questions about potential misuse of personal information.
even if it's all done in the back end and not publicly displayed.
Yeah.
So imagine this. You're sitting in the mains exam, and you get an essay question on the implications of Aadhaar voter ID linkage for individual rights. What are you writing?
Okay, good question. Well, first off, I'd acknowledge that, yeah, the stated goal is to improve electoral integrity. But critics argue that focusing solely on technological solutions like Aadhaar, well, it might distract from addressing the root causes of electoral malpractices.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound.
You got it. And then there's the whole issue of Aadhaar itself. What does it actually prove?
It proves residence right, not citizenship.
Exactly. So linking Aadhaar alone wouldn't solve the problem of non-citizen voters.
That's a good point.
And on top of that, critics argue that relying solely on Aadhaar could actually disenfranchise legitimate voters.
Also.
Well, think about it. What if there are errors in the database?
Oh, I see what you mean. Like someone's name is misspelled or something.
Exactly. That could lead to someone being wrongly denied their right to vote.
Yikes. That's a scary thought.
It is, and it highlights the need for really robust verification mechanisms.
Safeguards to prevent any unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Speaking of safeguards and potential pitfalls, let's do a quick fact check for our prelims folks out there. Is linking Aadhaar with voter ID mandatory in India? True or false?
Okay, let me think back. We talked about this earlier. It's false.
That's right. It's voluntary. The Election Commission has been very clear about that. Don't let those tricky wordings throw you off in the exam.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the pros, the cons, potential essay fodder for mains, and even a tricky prelims question. But where do we go from here? How do we navigate this complex landscape? What's the way forward?
Well, I think communication is key. The Election Commission needs to do a much better job of communicating with the public.
Transparency, right?
Exactly. They need to address those concerns about data privacy head on.
Be clear about the process, build trust.
Exactly. And, it's not just about communication. We also need to make sure the Aadhaar database itself is accurate and up to date.
Ah, that's right. If we're going to rely on this technology, it needs to be reliable.
Couldn't agree more. And remember those independent verification methods for citizenship that we talked about earlier. Those are crucial too.
Finding ways to verify citizenship accurately and efficiently without compromising individual rights.
It's a tough challenge, but it's one we need to tackle head on.
Okay, so future civil servants. This is where I want to get your brains working.
Yeah.
Imagine you're tasked with designing a public awareness campaign to build trust around Aadhaar voter ID linkage.
Ooh, that's a good one.
What are your key messages? What are you focusing on?
Well, first and foremost, I'd emphasize the voluntary nature of the linkage. Reassure voters that their right to vote is safe whether they link or not.
I'd also highlight the potential benefits, right? A cleaner electoral roll, a more efficient process.
Absolutely. But at the same time, we can't shy away from those concerns about data privacy and potential misuse. We need to acknowledge those concerns head on.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. Harnessing the power of technology while safeguarding individual rights.
Using technology to strengthen democracy, not undermine it. Welcome back, everyone. So we've talked a lot about the theory, the arguments for and against Aadhaar voter ID linkage, but how about we get a little more, well, practical?
Exactly. Look at some real-world examples, see how this is all playing out on the ground.
Right, because there are states in India that have actually taken the lead on this, kind of paving the way for the rest of the country.
Telangana is a great example. They've hit nearly 100% linkage.
And they've reported some pretty significant results, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. Significant reductions in duplicate entries and bogus voters, too.
So it's like they're providing a sort of blueprint for how this could actually work effectively.
I think so. Real-world data is super important, right?
Oh, absolutely. It helps to see things in action, not just as an idea. And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
All those political science journals we mentioned earlier. They're buzzing with research, trying to figure out the impact of this linkage on actual elections.
It's a hot topic. Everyone wants to know. Has it really led to fairer elections?
Right. Is there any evidence to back up those claims of, improved electoral integrity?
Well, some early studies are looking promising. They suggest a connection between Aadhaar linking and, a drop in voter fraud.
It's encouraging. But we probably need a bit more time to really see the full picture, right?
Definitely. More data, more research, and then we can draw some solid conclusions about those long-term impacts.
It's fascinating, though, isn't it? Because it's not just about technology or policy. We're talking about human behavior, voting patterns, the core of our democracy.
It's complex stuff, and, not everyone's convinced about this whole thing.
Oh, yeah. There are definitely valid concerns out there.
Privacy advocates, for instance. They're worried, even with safeguards in place.
Makes sense. It's sensitive information, that Aadhaar data.
Right. And those concerns about mass surveillance, about erosion of individual rights, we can't just ignore them.
You can't. And, some critics also argue that by putting so much emphasis on technology, we might be missing something,
Missing what?
the bigger picture.
Ah, you mean those deeper systemic issues that lead to electoral malpractice?
Exactly. Vote buying, intimidation, those on-the-ground challenges.
Hmm.
Technology alone can't fix those.
You're right. It goes beyond just having the right tech.
We have to address the root causes, not just the symptoms. It's like that
Mhm.
Band-Aid analogy, remember?
Right. But here's the thing. It's not always black and white. Sometimes there are arguments on both sides.
Like what?
Well, some proponents actually believe that Aadhaar linkage can empower marginalized communities.
Really?
Yeah, it could make it easier for them to register, to vote, especially if they don't have those traditional forms of ID.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it?
Very. It's not a simple yes or no, good or bad situation. You have to weigh the potential benefits against the risks, think about the context, listen to different viewpoints.
And that's what makes this topic so perfect for UPSC prep. It really pushes you to think critically, to analyze complex issues.
And to form well-rounded arguments, too.
All right, everyone. So we've reached the end of our Aadhaar voter ID linkage deep dive. From the history to the latest developments, even real-world case studies, we've covered a lot.
Remember, it's not just about memorizing facts and figures for the exam.
It's about understanding the nuances, the complexities, and how all this could shape India's democracy going forward.
Keep those brains working, keep asking those tough questions, stay informed.
And most importantly, form your own informed opinions.
Because you're not just preparing for an exam, you're preparing to serve the nation, to build a better tomorrow.
And hey, maybe someday you'll be the ones making those big decisions about how technology can be used to strengthen our democracy.
Until then, stay curious, keep exploring, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with all your fellow UPSC aspirants.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.